Wanted to get Pam Parsons on to talk about this and also just to get Pam's insights on the way back for the Liberal Party in her new role as Shadow Minister. Pam is the Shadow Minister for Public Safety and Justice and Emergency Preparedness and Human Rights and so many other things. Pam, do you have a shadow when you're a Shadow Minister, by the way? Do you have a shadow that follows you around, or how does it work?
You know, the term shadow minister, I first heard of it when we were in government and we were ministers, and the opposition were referring to themselves as shadow ministers as opposed to critics. I guess it's probably more of a positive term, but whatever. I guess, it's all the same. It's all the same. I guess focus, and that is to ultimately hold the ministers to account.
Yeah, no, and it actually comes from the British Parliament, where the term was originally adopted and then brought here. So, look, when you were certainly, and you've talked about this already in your critic role, Minister of Gender Equality, you were very critical in the early days of the Wakeham government. We're still in the early days of the Wakeham government about ending of that official ministerial title. But one of the things you talked about in there, which struck me, which I think probably has application to the circumstances in Goose Bay, is the gender-based violence. Building off of that, when you see what's happening in Goose Bay, and your government was trying to deal with it too, I mean, what are your thoughts about the best approach going forward? Because it's bad there based just on the data.
Well, it is bad, and that also comes into the category of justice and public safety. Goose Bay, as we know, is one of the highest crime rates, and in particular gender-based violence. We know, Tim, and you and I have talked about it before, that Indigenous women and girls suffer the highest rates of violence and violent deaths, even higher than the national average that we have right here in Labrador, in our very own province. So to see that the portfolio of women gender equality absorbed into like a very large portfolio, justice and public safety is large enough on its own, but also under that mandate for my colleague is also the Foreign Emergency Services portfolio, or right. So I mean, there's just so much there, and I mean, we have to give these proper departments and portfolios and areas that are in need the proper resources, the proper focus. I mean, I know as minister, I was Minister of Women Gender Equality, as you mentioned, and as well, prior to the election, I was also Minister for Rural Economic Development, Workplace and Labour Division. And I mean, I found that was even a larger role to take on more responsibility, more focus. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not surprised actually to see the cuts based on who's part of the transition team and I guess the right-winged strategists rather that have been brought down from Ottawa to come and to help lead this transition. And prior to that, way back in January, to work in the opposition office and ultimately lead the campaign. But I have called on Premier Wakeham, to reconsider this, because the stakeholders I've worked with, even the call to justice that had come out of the National Inquiry for murdered, missing Indigenous women and girls alone deserves significant focus and resources. We did some great work, but there's lots more work to do.
One of the things I was, to be fair, we had Steve Outhouse on, who you're referencing there earlier in the week, and he will make the point, as the Premier's made the point, and I'm just getting this on the record, that he's not involved in policy, but you were certainly entitled to your opinion, Pam, on this show and every other program. My question is this, though. One of the things that struck me that Keith Russell said is that, this isn't a partisan issue, that we have to find ways to address it. What constructive role do you think the opposition can play, you can play, in addressing what's happening in Goose Bay? Is it, as you say, by saying, look, you need to focus on gender violence too as it relates to Goose Bay, or are there other things you think are important?
Well, so one thing I learned as minister in that role, it's not simply about throwing money at any issue, whether it be healthcare. It's about, we need to change the conversation. We need to change the education. We need to change the systemic behavior. We need to bring, for example, men and boys in on these conversations, because they're part of the solutions. For example. And I think my colleague Russell is right when he says these are nonpartisan issues, because they are indeed nonpartisan. Just like the issues that we're facing now with regards to tariffs in the United States, we have to band together. I'll borrow a word a line rather from our Prime Minister Mark Carney just yesterday. You know, it's not a time to be tearing each other down. It's a time to be unified and to be building up. And that's exactly what we have to do. I mean, we're living in times like no other. I mean, one of my other critic roles is emergency preparedness and disaster management. And as we know, Tim, just right here in my region alone, the firefighters, the wildfires rather that we saw here for the half of the summer, here in the whole month of August, we were all on the edge of our seats. I mean, the world is changing, climate is changing, climate change is real. And we need to be prepared. We need to do things differently. That's more efficiently. I mean, the world wasn't the same place it was 10 years ago. It wasn't the same place. Certainly, healthcare, for example, we can't be using the same model. And that's what Premier Ferry aimed to do was, of course, to change that model of delivery through the Health Accord. And that's what it's all about. I mean, we live in changing times. Society wants to see a government reflecting itself. So therefore, I think it's important to go back to the women and gender equality aspect. We got to look after everybody. I know that Tony Wakeham's, Premier Wakeham's, one of his slogans were, for all of us. But to right then and there to see the cut to women and gender equality, that to me is not very inclusive alone, and I mean, it's all, and we need to, we know that what we're seeing across the border now is a time not to be cutting back on diversity, inclusion, and equality. It's a time to stand up, to stand united, to stand together, to support, because these groups that are under these mandates are vulnerable. They are the most vulnerable in society. So it's a time to do what we can to protect each other and to support each other rather than cut. I mean, I know apparently it was done in the name of the savings, but I mean, you take that savings over the course of, say, 4 years of a mandate, it's going to end up costing or compromising more money down the road. Health and community services. What I heard, Tim, on the campaign trail is the stories and the experiences, the anecdotes that I heard from my constituents alone about their experiences in healthcare. We need to completely redefine and the delivery in healthcare to ultimately support the people who are working in healthcare on the front lines, giving this care and giving this service to the patients that need it. And you know what? We're all impacted because at some point in time, whether it's our family members, whether it's us, we're all going to have to avail of healthcare. But to see that portfolio lumped up with Indigenous Affairs and Reconciliation as well as Labrador Affairs, I just don't know how that's going to be possible. And again, it's not about an individual. It's not about their credentials. It's about, we're all human beings, Tim, at the end of the day. Just like you're a human being, I'm a human being. We can only do the best we can. But I really believe, unfortunately, with the way these portfolios are shaped, some of them, I'm concerned. And I've heard from my constituents are concerned.
That's the nicest thing I've been called all day, by the way, as a human being. You should hear what my mother calls me, Pam, by the way. Now, look, I can only give you a minute on this one, and I appreciate you you could speak to it for a while, but you're a former top-notch reporter, so I know you can give me an answer in a minute. Path back for the Liberal Party, what would be some quick things you would say on that? What does it look like over the next few months, next year?
Well, first of all, a heartfelt thank you to the constituents of Harbour Grace-Port de Grave. I mean, it's my fourth time being elected, and I appreciate their support, and it means the world to me. But again, we've got a really strong group. We've got a number of cabinet ministers on our side here in the opposition, and everybody's unified. Everybody's behind our leader. I have a lot of respect. I have a lot of admiration for John Hogan, and I think this opportunity is going to give him a real opportunity to shine in the House of Assembly and otherwise, because as we know, he's pretty slick and he's pretty articulate. And he's quite intelligent. So we're behind him. We're cohesive as a group. And ultimately, Premier Wakeham made a lot of promises. There's 4 new ferries that we look forward to seeing them built here in Newfoundland and Labrador. 4 brand new ferries to be built in Newfoundland and Labrador. I also look forward to seeing Premier Wakeham bring the MOU to a referendum as he has promised the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. As we know, the MOU, you and I have talked about it. People want more information on it. We know our history with Quebec, and rightfully so. People want to know what's in those facts. We want to be protected by escalation clauses, which we had in that deal. But Tim, we stand to gain $250 billion over several decades. That's a situation that Newfoundland and Labrador has never been in. We talk about fixing healthcare. We talk about schools, roads, and everything that we need. We need funding to do it. So I really hope that Premier Wakeham, that we don't miss out on this opportunity. Bring that MOU. Let's open the House of Assembly. Tim, we're supposed to be in the House of Assembly now.
Pam, you are not going to struggle in opposition. You are good at it. You fit your points. I'm teasing. Well, I'm not teasing. You're doing well. I got to leave it there. Appreciate the time. Okay. Thank you for joining us today. Always fun to chat.
I look forward to chatting again. And thank you, Tim. And thank you to all your listeners. And again, I look forward to having the conversation again soon.
All right. Take care. That is Pam Parsons, MHA.